Welcome to the latest episode of the Men's Mysteries. Today's title is a little provocative, but it's relevant. Your cock is medicine. I first read that in the book Man Uncivilized by Trevor Baum, and I remember thinking, wow, that was a bold statement. And it is. And it's also true. One of the problems that men have around their sexuality is they situate their sexuality in relationship to the other. And what I mean by the other is they situate their sexuality in relationship to the object of desire. Now, when I use that phrase object of desire, I'm going to be clear that I am not advocating for objectification or anything along those lines. But I think that a lot of times what ends up happening is men get into a relationship with their sexuality where they're so focused on quote unquote having sex with other people, or at least experiencing the fantasy of that they're not really exploring their sexuality, and they're not exploring it in relationship to themselves and who and what they are and what it means. And they're limiting their notion of sexuality to penetrative sex. Now, speaking as a cisgender heterosexual man, I'll be the first to admit I like having penetrative sex. I enjoy it a lot. And there's a lot more to our sexuality than just penetrative sex. The problems that men face is that they're so focused on that act, and they're so limited by that act that they're not really recognizing that they're leaving a lot of their own sexuality on the table, and in the process losing real connection with themselves and with their partners. And our sexuality is one of the most important and potent experiences that can bring us into full presence, or it can bring us into full numbness. Now, if you're watching this, chances are you've watched porn at some time or another. All of us have, or you've looked at a porn magazine or something along those lines. I mean, I certainly have. I've never been what would be called a porn addict. I haven't watched hours and hours and hours and hours of porn. I've occasionally watched a bit of porn, and I've looked at the occasional porn magazine. And yet, for a lot of men, this is a real challenge. They get focused on porn as as kind of their as it's kind of the experience and expression of sex, and it usually comes about for a few reasons. One, they may feel like that's the only way they can actually experience sex. This is especially the case for younger men who are maybe feeling a lot of frustration because they don't know how to connect with women, and consequently we see this in the rise of like the incel movement, where there's actually a lot of misogyny and hatred for women because women aren't making themselves available the way that men think they should, and so there's a sense of entitlement there. This also shows up in the form of young men and older men taking pills for sex because they feel like they have to do any and everything they can to stay as hard for as long as they possibly can. And as a result, they don't understand the physiology of their body and how to connect with their cock in a meaningful and potent way. It comes through in other ways as well. Men's sexuality is something that is ignored in a lot of what's out there. There are very few books on male sexuality. One of the books that I've read is called The Penis Book, and it's a really good book. There's another one called The Male Pelvis, and I recommend both books. These are books that explore the male genitals and the male body and explore the fact that, for one thing, our sexuality isn't just limited to our cock and our balls. There are many different expressions of male sexuality. We look at male sexuality, one of the things that we want to really consider is the fact that male sexuality can be a very beautiful experience. It can also be a very numbing experience if we aren't in healthy relationship with it. So, for the man who finds himself looking at porn all the time, he's not going to be in a healthy relationship with his own sexuality and his own body. He's going to be disengaged. He's going to be disconnected. And if he finds himself in a relationship, he's going to have a hard time, pun intended, having sex because he's so engaged in porn, and it's hijacked his physiology. This happens a lot for men. This is one of the reasons why I actually highly recommend not watching porn other than the rare occasion. I mean, it's one thing if you want to watch it with a partner, have a little bit of fun that way, but really, I would really recommend ultimately just actually divorcing yourself from porn altogether, because it's not really all that healthy for you. And there's an interesting component to sexual fantasies, or which porn can really embody. And this is one thing I will say about porn that can be useful actually for men. Look at the porn that you tend to watch. Like, what is that porn that you're drawn to? Because that may tell you something essential about your sexuality. And here's what that is. A lot of times our sexuality is wrapped around our wounding. What do I mean by that? It's wrapped around the way that we may have been wounded in relationships early on, like with our parents or things along those lines, where what ends up happening is that a lot of the porn that we're drawn to is actually in some ways an attempt to work through some of the issues that we have. And we may not realize it, that we're sexualizing our wounding. An example that I'll use from my own life is that there was a time where the porn that I would watch would end up being about stepmoms seducing their stepsons. And I'd had a stepmom wound. I'd had a stepmom a long time ago. It wasn't that I necessarily even desired her, but there was a sense for me, and I really explored this, that in part I was drawn to it because it was a way for me to kind of reconcile that wounding that I had experienced, through the mental abuse and occasional physical abuse that I'd experienced at her hands. So when we look at male sexuality and we look at like porn, that can be an indicator of something that we need to heal, but we really ideally aren't using porn in general in order to satiate our sexual appetites, because what we're doing when we do that is we're actually wasting our sexual energy. And here's the key lesson about sexual energy. Sexual energy is linked to our creative energy. Whether you're a man or a woman, your sexual energy is linked to your creativity. For women, this comes very obviously in the form of, like, if a woman becomes pregnant and she's quote unquote creating a child. The process of pregnancy is a creation, but it also comes out in the form of in other ways. So, like, if you're somebody who's a creative writer or an artist or a musician, there's a reason why there's a lot of sexual energy with that creative energy. And of course, it can show up in other ways as well. So we have to be really careful about where we direct our energy sexually, because where we direct our energy sexually will also speak to where we're directing our energy in our lives. If you find yourself putting a lot of energy toward porn, what can end up happening is that you're basically wasting your creative energy, your creative essence. And as a result, you're letting go of something essential to who you are. Now, as a sovereign man, it's really important to claim every aspect of your being, including your sexual energy. Because when you're able to claim your sexual energy and you're able to claim your sexuality, then you are able to show up better for yourself. And as a result, you're able to show up better for the potential partners that you want to get involved with. One of the issues that I think is problematic for so many men is that their ideas of sexuality is so informed by porn, or so informed by the idea of entitlement, they're not really connecting in a very real, raw, and relational way to their own sexuality. A while back, I took a class on masculine sexuality, and I took it at the time when I was in a very dysfunctional relationship. I took it I fully admit this. I took it with the idea that maybe taking this course would help me figure out the sexual relationship with this other person. Turned out that it had nothing to do about being in relationship with another person. It had everything to do about learning how to be in relationship with my own sexuality and exploring what that meant. What did it mean, for example, to be more sensual? What did it mean to be in touch with my body? What did it mean to explore my body as a sexual being? These were things I hadn't really thought about because, for the most part, what I've seen in regards to masculine sexuality is supposed to be about her. It's supposed to be about pleasing her, about getting her to orgasm, about, and this is a hetero thing that I'm talking about here, but I think that the same thing likely applies if you're queer or gay, or if you identify in any other form of sexuality that is out there, and there are many different flavors, that the same concept applies, that it's all about giving to your other partner or to your partner, as opposed to receiving for yourself. What I came to realize is that for me, for the most part, most of my sexual identity was really wrapped up around performance. It was wrapped up around pleasing the other person, instead of actually getting real with like what actually turns me on, what pleases me, what do I like. It took me a long time to figure out that what I actually like and what I enjoy for myself is not necessarily the same thing as what I was doing when I was being sexual with the partners that were in my life. Most of the time I was so focused on giving that other person an orgasm and measuring my sense of worth around that, that I wasn't really connecting with my sexuality in a meaningful and powerful way. And here's the problem for that: when you're with somebody else, they can tell when you're not fully present with yourself. And they might enjoy the sex, and it may be some hot and amazing sex, but there's still something that's missing. The best sex that I've ever had in my life was sex that I had where I wasn't trying to please someone else, where I wasn't trying to get them off. It was where I was really actually in touch with my own sexual essence and pleasure, and focused on pleasing myself and connecting with myself. And whatever I was doing to that person or doing with that person was really, in no small part, a response to what I actually wanted to do. In a sense, what I've discovered is that really good sex is in part a selfish act, healthy selfishness, because in learning to please and focus on myself, then I'm able to better show up and please the other person. Because when I'm with somebody and I'm going down on them and I'm enjoying the act of going down on them for my own pleasure, that's when it actually becomes a lot more real, because then they're actually experiencing how I'm genuinely into it, and that's turning them on, and they're able to enjoy it more. And these are the kinds of conversations that we don't always have, and we need to be having. So, what does it really mean to reclaim our sexuality? I mean, reclaiming our sexuality is really defining what our relationship with ourselves is. And it's not just about your cock and your balls, it's about your entire body. It's about your ass. It's about your skin. It's about the sensuousness of the experience. It's about your tongue and your fingers, your feet, and everything else. It's all of it. And again, for many men, they're not really even used to thinking along those lines, because a lot of the time they're not even used to receiving. Or if they do receive something, it's usually in the form of a blowjob. Well, and that feels great. But what about the experience of having sex with somebody where they are so fully into you and you are so fully into them, and you're discovering what that is and you're taking your time? Something that I've noticed and heard plenty of stories of, is that a lot of men basically go as fast as they can, and part of that is because of porn. Because like if we look at porn, a lot of times it's just like a guy hammering into a woman as fast and as hard as he can, because that's what's going to get her off. And then of course she's doing a lot of exaggerated moaning, showing that she's getting off. But that's not what really good sex is. Really good sex is slow sex. It's sensual and sensory. It's taking your time, and it doesn't start when your penis enters into the woman's vagina or into the man's butthole. It starts with the first look. It starts with smelling the person, kissing the person, licking the person, touching and connecting with the person sensually, and letting them touch and connect with you sensually. Our sexuality and our sexual power isn't something that is expressed in the absence of our body or through a specific organ. It is expressed through the entirety of our being. And for our cock to become medicine, we actually have to become medicine for ourselves. This is a real thing. There are so many men I know that are not in touch with their sexual being. And it's through no fault of their own. It's because they haven't had the opportunity to connect with that part of themselves. They've thrown it to porn, or they've focused so much on pleasing the other person that they haven't discovered what it means to be sexual in and of themselves. And I'm not talking about just masturbation here. I mean, that is an example of being sexual, and that can certainly bring a lot of pleasure. And there's something to be said for spending your time just exploring and experiencing your cock and your body slowly, sensually. Like when you wake up in the morning and you're hard, just spending some time just stroking yourself and being in touch with yourself and taking time with yourself. That is a beautiful and powerful experience. And you don't necessarily need to ejaculate. In fact, here's an interesting fact for it. Yeah, in fact, here's an interesting fact for you. Okay, I could word that one better, but still, ejaculation does not automatically equal orgasm for men. I've had ejaculations where I did not orgasm and did not really even enjoy the experience. And I've had ejaculations where I have. I've had orgasms where I didn't ejaculate at all, where I just felt the entire experience through my body. There's a wide range of sexual experiences that so many men are missing out on because they're so focused on the idea of ejaculation. And what they're missing out on is the wholeness of the pleasure, the wholeness of being fully connected with their own sexuality in an intimate and powerful way. Think about that for a moment. Land with it. Let it land in your being. What does it really mean to be sexual? What does it mean to connect with ourselves in a sexual way? If we want to have the beauty of masculine sexuality, we need to reclaim the sacredness of it. We need to recognize that a sexual experience with somebody else isn't something to be had casually. I've had lots of casual sex over the years, and I can tell you that it's not that although there's maybe a thrill in the moment, it's not something that's really soul sustaining and feeding. What's soul sustaining and feeding is when we treat sex as a sacred act. And that doesn't mean that we have to have slow sex all the time. It doesn't mean that we can't enjoy a quickie. It doesn't mean any of that. What it does mean is that we are fully present and embodied with our partner. We're fully bodied and present with ourselves, and we are in touch with our sexual essence and expression. We recognize that it's a gift. It's not something to just give away casually. It's not about getting off as quickly as possible. It's about the full range and experience and expression of your being in your presence. This is what your partner is looking for from you. This is what your partner is craving. And that can come in many different forms. It could be being kinky. It could be playing with some sex toys. And that's fine. That's healthy. It could be penetrative sex. It could be oral sex. It could just be sensually touching each other. It could be giving a massage. It could be so many different things. But what it isn't something that we casually give away. What I want to urge to all of you who are watching this is to go slow with yourselves and go slow with the people that you're with. Take your time. Discover what it means to be a sexual being. This is part of the power and the medicine of our bodies And this is one of the ways that men can reclaim their sovereign power, is to take back their sexuality, to let go of the porn, let go of the stereotypical ideas as to what they think sex is, and start becoming present with who and what they are. If you're curious about that, check out the guide that I have below that can help you start that journey. Because when we become sovereign men, that's when we reclaim who and what we are. And that is a powerful and transformative experience. Thank you for watching, and I invite you to explore the beauty of your cock and your masculinity. Let yourself truly discover your sexual being. There's so much more to it than just the act of penetration or ejaculation. And when we become fully present with that, we can give more of ourselves to our lovers and to ourselves.